Welcome to Poland Daily History with me, Nicholas Richardson. In this episode, we will look more closely at the process of Germanification and Russification.
So the Poles, they faced themselves with fighting this in the West, in the western parts of Poland that were under the German Empire. It became known as the Kulturkampf. Mainly it was Chancellor Otto von Bismarck's struggle against Roman Catholicism in Poland. He was trying to weed it out as good as he could, but it also encompassed the Polish language and all forms of Polish self-organization. The same was happening in the Russian partition. There it was a war against Greek Orthodoxy that existed in Eastern Poland, but also Roman Catholicism. Here it was, again, the language was a very important issue. Strong efforts at Russification, but the Poles were lucky that, at least in the Austrian partition, they had somewhat of a safe haven. The Austrians, they considered the Poles as the most important part of that multicultural part of Austria. There was a large Ukrainian minority, a Jewish minority as well, and you could say that the Austrians wanted to outsource some of their leadership slightly to the Poles. The Poles played the main role in the regional semi-autonomous parliament in Galicia. Poles also took up very high positions in the federal government in Vienna. And it was a time where Krakow especially gained this position as the intellectual hub and cultural hub of Poland as well. The universities in Lviv, or Lviv as it is known today, and Krakow became beacons of light and intellectualism. And this is a position that the Krakowians, even to this day, they feel a certain superiority over Warsaw. They consider themselves as the intellectual center of Poland, so to say. Many Warsawians will, of course, not agree, but this is a stereotype that is in force, and you can say was partly created during the Austrian partition. Also, apart from this positivist movement that led to the creation of national democracy with its organic work, the general processes of the age, industrialization, urbanization, mining and manufacturing had increased greatly both in the Prussian partition, or later German partition, and the Russian partition, leading to great urbanization. And this also created changes in societal structure. A lot of peasants were moving into these cities that were growing very quickly. However, it also led to some cultural clashes and ethnic problems. The cities had previously had large minorities of Jews and Germans, many of them working on important positions, being doctors, lawyers, shopkeepers, especially when it came to the Jewish population. And these peasants that had come into the cities and they wanted to advance their social status, they found themselves locked out, you could say, from the market, from climbing on the social ladder. This led to great ethnic problems, both between the Germans and the Poles, but also the Poles and the Jews. Another problem was that the Jews, which previously had been mainly assimilating into Polish culture, in the German partition especially, they started identifying more and more with German culture. Partly it was naturally because the Germans were in control, but also the Germans lived in the cities in Western Poland. In Eastern Poland, you had more Jews living out in the countryside, but in Western Poland, they were mainly living in the cities. So were the Germans, so they lived close together, they interacted more with each other. Also, the language, Yiddish, is a language that has some Hebrew loan words, but it's mainly a Germanic language, so it was easy for the Jews to adapt to these new circumstances, and they started assimilating more and more with the Germans. Some of the Poles saw that as a betrayal, as they had been loyal subjects or citizens of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth for centuries before. Also, this ethnic strife and problems took place in the Austrian partition and in the Russian partition. There you had large Orthodox, previously so-called Ruthenian populations. By the late 19th century and the early 20th century, they were starting to create their own national movements in the southern part of the area. This was the Ukrainian revival. In the northern part, the Belarusian. Even though the Belarusian was slightly weaker than the Ukrainian, the Ukrainian, it became a mass movement. In Belarus, it was only really the intellectual elite that identified with the Belarusian nation. But this ethnic strife was especially visible in the Austrian partition in Galicia, which was just as it was the intellectual hotbed of Poland. It was the same for the Ukrainian national movement that was growing. And these were tensions that survived later into the interwar era when Poland was in control of the area. These general societal changes, especially the growth of the cities and the amount of peasants moving into the cities and becoming workers, led to also a growth of socialist movements that had started penetrating the former Congress kingdom, coming in from Western Europe especially. Here you had especially Józef Piłsudski, that was the main figure. He was strongly influenced by the insurrectionist tradition of the January uprising. He considered its commander, Romuald Traugott, as a personal hero of his own. And he was also certain that this positivist organic work, it was all good and fair, but it could not deflect from the need for armed struggle. So he started working on creating these fighting units of socialists that would later become quite involved in the fight for Polish independence.
Thank you for watching, and see you next time.